Hey y'all, welcome back to my channel. Thank you so much for being here. I hope you're having a fantastic week. Mine's been great. Today we're going to talk about the disappearance of Susan Powell. Susan Cox Powell was born October 16th in 1981. Susan was described as a very giving, warm, and kind-hearted person. She was also known as an amazing mother to her two boys. Susan was married to Josh Powell, who was born January 20th, 1976. Josh's early life was pretty troubling. Josh's dad, Steven Powell, was known to be abusive. While in court for his previous marriage, Josh described his dad as abusive and he was struggling emotionally because of it. According to Josh, his dad would show him really disturbing pornographic images. Josh began acting out at an early age. He killed his pet gerbils, tried to attack his mother with a butcher knife, and even tried taking his own life. Susan and Josh were both Mormons, and if you don't know anything about that religion, it's very strict. And they met when Susan was just 19 and got married just a couple months later. For the first few years of their marriage, Josh and Susan were thought to be the perfect couple. They eventually moved from Oregon to Utah and welcomed their first son, Charles, on January 19th, 2005. Less than 2 years, on January 2nd, 2007, they had their second son, Braden. The Powells appeared to be a happy family, but soon after her second son was born, Susan started spilling secrets to a childhood friend. She said that Josh pretty much owned her and that he was very controlling about their finances, and that he even started to take away love and affection, and that she knew the exact date that her two sons were conceived because he took away the sex and all the affection out of their marriage. In addition to the emotional stress in the marriage, there was also financial stress, and Josh filed for bankruptcy in 2008. And shortly before he filed for bankruptcy, Susan filmed this really weird video.
This is me, July 29th, 2008. It is 12:33. Mountain time, covering all my bases, making sure that if something happens to me or my family or all of us, that our assets are documented. Hope everything works out and we're all happy and live happily ever after as much as that's possible. Charlie, say hi. Here is a rigid saw. I don't know the differences. I think this is a chop saw. And there is a shop vac. This is all stuff bought in a year or less through Home Depot. On my credit. Josh bought a lot of stuff and then he had to bankrupt it. And then he bought a little bit more on my credit. Oh, there's his RC car. It's pretty pimped out. If you can see that stuff. I think he's got probably a 3,000 worth of supplies in the RC car world. I've got all sorts of files. This is all thanks to me trying to save them. Whole lot more tools. Hover Storm, you bought a stupid hovercraft remote control toy. This is a can organizer that Josh and I made. I had to help him all through the way. He doesn't do projects by himself. This bike I paid out of my Wells Fargo account. Tools galore. More tools galore.
In this video, you can tell that Susan is kind of describing Josh as lazy because she says Josh didn't help with this, or Josh didn't do this, Josh didn't do that. So she kind of just makes out like she has to do everything herself. She even talks about how Josh filed bankruptcy and he had to use her credit to purchase certain things, and she didn't really seem too happy about it. Now, moving forward to December 7th, 2009, Susan was supposed to drop the two boys off at daycare, but she never showed up. So daycare called Josh's sister, Jennifer, because she was their emergency contact. Jennifer went over to the house, knocked on the door, couldn't get anybody to come to the door or answer the phone, and so she called the police. And she was kind of afraid that maybe they had been poisoned by carbon monoxide or that something had happened to the family. So the police made the decision to break into the house. And when they got in there, all they found were Susan's purse and cell phone. And they also found that there had been, the carpet was wet and there was two big box fans pointed at the carpet like it was trying to dry the carpet. So maybe somebody had had an accident on the carpet, or even somebody had been murdered there, who knows. When Josh Powell was questioned, him and the boys had just returned from Simpson's campground, and he said that they had went camping the night before around midnight, and when they returned, Susan was not there. So Josh was interviewed, and his interview was really, really bizarre.
You do not know where she's at? Okay. What do you think has happened to her? I need you to tell me what you think has happened to her.
I don't think she would leave on her own.
Have I told you that you're a suspect?
Well, it's felt like that a few times.
One of our detectives just interviewed your children. And your children are telling our detectives that Mom went with you guys last night. And that she didn't come back.
She did not go with us.
You could leave anytime anyways.
Yeah. I mean, let me think about it for a couple days and...
Your wife is missing, Josh.
Yeah, but I've already...
And you want to think about it for a couple of days?
I've already answered everything. And I told you I would answer everything.
One weird fact about Josh Powell is the day after Susan went missing, he rented a car and he returned it 2 days later, having driven it over 800 miles. 10 days after she was reported missing, Josh Powell cleaned out all of Susan's retirement accounts. So why would you do that? If your wife is missing and you're expecting her to come back, obviously, why would you clean out all of her retirement funds? One of the really weird facts about this case too is it took Josh 2 days to tell her family that Susan was missing. A month after Susan went missing, Josh Powell moved to Washington to live with his father, and in 2011 he was convicted of some sex crimes. So Josh and Susan's kids were actually removed from the home, and they went to live with Susan's parents, the Coxes, and they started opening up and verbalizing a little bit about maybe what happened to Susan or what supposedly happened to Susan. And one of them drew a picture of the car, and it was him, his brother, and his dad, and they said, "Where's your mom?" And he said, "Well, my mom is in the trunk." And when he was questioned about it further, they said, "What happened?" And he said, "We all went into the woods and Mommy never came back." So that led a lot of people to believe that Josh murdered Susan. While many people and many members of law enforcement believe that Josh murdered Susan, Josh and his dad, Steven Powell, tried to convince everybody that Susan ran off to be with another man. And this man's name was Steven Kosher, and I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing his last name right, but he went to church with the Powells. And another really disturbing thing about this case is that Josh's dad, Steven, was madly in love with Susan Powell, and he kept journals to document his love.
Susan was very, very sexual with me. She was very flirtatious. I mean, I'm her father-in-law, and she would do a lot of things that I mean, she did it, I did. I mean, we interacted in a lot of sexual ways because Susan enjoys doing that.
Do you think a part of you started falling in love with Susan?
That's pretty likely, yeah. I mean, yeah, I would say so. And there's no question in my mind that the feelings were mutual.
And I want to read this because I wanted to get it exactly right. But Stephen wrote, "My biggest problem, as well as my greatest pleasure, lies in the fact that for over a year, I've been madly in love with my daughter-in-law, Susan. I have never lusted for another woman as I do for Susan." Stephen also wrote in his journal about Josh and Susan, saying theirs is truly a marriage made in hell. There was also a very unusual lack of entries between October 2009 and May 2010, which we know that Susan went missing in December 2009, so I thought that was a little bit strange. He also wrote 2 really creepy songs about Susan, and I'm going to read a couple of the lyrics from both of them, but I will play the song for you. He wrote, "If there were simple answers for a way to be with you, there isn't much I wouldn't try or much I wouldn't do." And in another song called "I'm Missing You," he writes, "I can love you in a secret way. I can love you each and every day. There's nothing I can't see. There's nothing you can't be. It's not perfect, but I'm missing you."
I can love you in a secret way. I can love you each and every day.
That is really sketchy and really creepy, and it just gives me chill bumps to even read that or look at that. He also kept, he had stolen some of her underwear out of her drawer and kept them. He also even kept little square pieces of paper that she used to wax her legs, and he stole some hair out of her hairbrush. So imagine finding out that your father-in-law or your mother-in-law was madly in love with you and took things out of your trash and kept. That is just the creepiest thing in the entire world to me. And that makes me question if maybe he had something to do with her disappearance. Maybe he felt like if he couldn't have her, nobody could. Josh's sister has admitted that she thinks that Steven Powell, Josh's dad, Josh, and his brother Michael Powell all have something to do with Susan's disappearance. She even worked with authorities and wore a wire to try and go undercover to catch Josh saying something sketchy about Susan.
Maybe I could get a wire.
Jennifer and her husband make the trip to Washington State in fear and trepidation, but determined to get the truth.
And we went over to my dad's house that Friday night and confronted them. It was the scariest thing I've probably ever done. They could hear everything that we said. They would have unmarked vehicles down the street, and they would have a helicopter circling. And I'm like, okay, so what are our key words in case anything goes wrong? He's like, let's just keep it simple. He's got a gun. Or help. Shoved him into the bathroom. And I was just like, tell me where her body is. Just tell me where her body is. We need to have a funeral. He wouldn't budge. He was so deadpan. There was no emotion.
Let's fast forward to February 5th, 2012. So a social worker is bringing Braden and Charlie to visit Josh. He has to have supervised visits still. He still has not got custody of his kids back. He's tried many times unsuccessfully. And she's bringing them to visit him. And when the two kids go in, Josh Powell slams the door in the social worker's face. So she gets freaked out and calls 911.
Reporting. Hey, I'm on a supervised visitation for a court-ordered visit. And something really weird has happened. The kids went into the house and the parent, the biological parent, whose name is Josh Powell, will not let me in the door. What should I do?
What's the address?
It's 8119, and I think it's 89th. I don't know what the address is.
Okay, that's pretty important for me to know.
You can't find me by GPS?
No.
But I think I need help right away. Are you there?
Yes, ma'am, I'm just waiting to know where you are.
Okay. It's 8119 189th Street, Court East, Puyallup, 98375. And I'd like to pull out of the driveway because I smell gasoline and he won't let me in.
You want to pull out of the driveway because you smell gasoline, but he won't let you...
He won't let me in.
He won't let you out of the driveway?
He won't let me in the house.
Whose house is it?
He's got the kids in the house and he won't let me in. It's a supervised visit.
I understand. Whose house is it?
Josh Powell.
Okay, so you don't live there, right?
No, I don't. No, I'm contracted to the state to provide supervised visitation.
I see. And who is there to exercise their visitation?
I am. And the visit is with Josh Powell.
And who
And
supervises?
he is the husband of I supervise.
So you supervise and you're doing the visit?
Yeah,
You're
I
supervising
supervise
yourself? Wait a minute. If it's a supervised visit, you can't supervise yourself. If you're the
I
visitor...
do supervise myself. I'm the supervisor for the supervised visit. Okay, how long will it be?
I don't know, ma'am. They have to respond to emergency, life-threatening situations first.
He didn't really act like it was an emergency that Josh Powell rushed the kids in there and then slammed the door because it was supposed to be a supervised visit. He said that they had other issues that were more pressing.
Hi, ma'am. Were you calling about the fire in the 8200 block of 188th Street, Court East? The house. Ma'am, do you know the... Okay.
And once inside the house, Josh Powell attacked his sons with a hatchet, leaving them with wounds on their face and on their neck. And then he set a fire that exploded and left him and his two children dead. Once the two boys were inside, Josh attacked them with the hatchet, leaving them with wounds to their head and neck, but not before setting off an explosion that ended all three of their lives. Before killing himself, Josh left a voicemail to his family as well as to his lawyer, apologizing, saying that he couldn't go on anymore without his children.
Hello, this is Josh. I'm calling to say goodbye. I am not able to live without my sons, and I'm not able to go on anymore. I'm sorry to everyone I've hurt. Goodbye.
A year after Josh killed himself and his two children, his brother Michael Powell ended his life by jumping off a parking structure in Minneapolis, Minnesota. He was in an ongoing battle with Susan's parents about life insurance for his two nephews, and the police had often suspected that he knew where Susan's body was, and that he had had some aid in her disappearance, but he always denied in harming Susan. The police had tried many times to catch Josh and Michael talking between each other, but they always used encrypted messages when conversing. Authorities released records in 2013 stating that they believed that Josh Powell had been involved in his Susan's disappearance, and they also believed that Michael Powell had some knowledge and may even have helped Josh move the body. Authorities were able to determine that Josh had been unfaithful to Susan about 6 or 7 months before she disappeared. They had contacted a woman whose name has been redacted from the report, who met Josh on Live Links, which is a dating site, and she had also said that Josh paid her about $800 in those 6 to 7 months, but she did not say what the money was for. But she said that she thought that Josh's name was John Stanley, and she had no clue he was married. In May 2013, the West Valley Police Department closed their investigation into Susan's disappearance. But even though the police have given up hope, Susan's family continued to look for her in hopes of bringing her body home. Before I get into the theories on this case, I'm just going to say that there are so many theories, and we're just going to go through a couple that I thought were most likely. I don't know if this is really a theory or not, but Chuck Cox, which is Susan's father, believes that Josh poisoned her pancakes and that's how he killed her. Of course, one theory is infidelity. Josh was known to have the affair with the woman from Live Leaks. Maybe he had other affairs. And this woman was a sex worker. He paid her for sex, and maybe he didn't want Susan to know that he was paying for sex, and that's why he killed her, so he could have multiple affairs. And of course, there's always the financial troubles. Josh filing bankruptcy, he was very controlling to Susan when it came to money. He actually would not let her have a phone at one point. He made her ride her bicycle from their West Valley home to the downtown place where she worked. He made her save money on showers by only letting her run every other day, and he made her be very, very strict about couponing. So money is always a motive for murder. So another theory is that Josh committed altruism, and altruism is basically where you feel like your kids are not better off with anybody else other than yourself, so you kill them. And he felt that since they were living with Susan's parents, that they were not getting the best care. They could only get the best care with him, and he had tried many, many times to get them back unsuccessfully, and he just could not maintain custody of his children, so he killed them because he felt like they would not be well off enough with anybody other than himself. Well guys, that's it for today's video. I hope you enjoyed it. This is a really disturbing case, and I've had a lot of nightmares about it. And if there's any other cases that you want me to cover, just drop the name below, and please don't forget to hit like and subscribe. And thank you so much for watching. Bye!